Hello everyone, this is Ashmita Gadal, and today I'm going to talk about the impacts of temperature and precipitation on crop growth, physiology, and yield using cotton and soybean as examples. I choose this topic because temperature and precipitation are among the most important climate factors affecting agriculture, and they were also the key factors in my own master's research. So I will briefly explain how the temperature and precipitation influence the crop growth and stress. Then I will connect this topic to my master's research in Alabama, where I examined the relationship between the climate variability and its impact on cotton and soybean yield. Temperature and precipitation matter in crops because plants depend directly on environmental conditions for their growth and survival. Unlike humans or animals, plants cannot move away from stress. They must respond to the conditions around them. Temperature is important because it affects the speed of plant development, metabolic activity, and reproductive processes. For example, when the temperature is within a favorable range, crops can grow normally. But when the temperature becomes too high, plant processes become disturbed, and this can lead to stress. Precipitation is equally important because it determines how much water is available in the soil. Water is needed for nutrient transport, cell expansion, photosynthesis, and maintaining plant structure. When rainfall is not enough, plants begin to experience water stress and their growth and productivity are reduced. So, overall, temperature and precipitation are major drivers of crop performance because they affect both crop physiology and final yield. Now I will talk more specifically about high temperature. High temperatures can reduce photosynthesis and disturb normal plant growth. One reason is that heat stress affects enzymes and other cellular processes involved in plant metabolism. So when the temperatures become too high, the plant has difficulty maintaining normal physiological activity. Heat stress is especially harmful during the flowering and reproductive development. This is very important because the reproductive stage is the period when yield is actually being formed. If the plant experiences stress during this stage, the final yield can decline even if the earlier vegetative growth looked normal. So precipitation affects crop growth mainly through water availability. Rainfall supplies the water needed for photosynthesis, nutrient movement, and cell expansion. When soil moisture is adequate, plants can maintain normal physiological processes, growth, and development. However, when rainfall is low, plants may experience water stress. One of the first plant responses to low water availability is stomatal closure. Stomata are the small openings on the leaf surface that allow gas exchange. When the plant closes the stomata to conserve water, it also reduces carbon dioxide uptake. As a result, photosynthesis declines. Water stress can therefore reduce plant growth, limit reproductive success, and finally reduce yield. In many crops, water stress is especially harmful during reproductive stages because it is then the plant is developing the structures that determine the yield. So another important point is that rainfall timing matters, not only the total amount. The same amount of rainfall can be helpful if it comes during the sensitive stage, but less helpful if it comes too early or too late. So precipitation is important not only in quantity but also in timing. Now I will focus especially on cotton. Cotton is a warm season crop, so it generally grows well under warm conditions. However, that does not mean that very high temperatures are always beneficial. Cotton is still sensitive to extreme heat, especially during the flowering and ball development. When cotton is exposed to heat stress during these sensitive stages, ball retention may decline. In other words, the plant may fail to retain some developing fruiting bodies, thereby directly reducing the productivity. Water stress can also reduce ball retention and fiber development. If the plant does not receive enough water, it cannot maintain normal growth and reproductive performance. Soybean also responds strongly to temperature and water availability, especially during the reproductive stage. Soybeans are sensitive to heat and water stress during flowering and seed filling. These are very important stages because they determine pod formation, seed number, and seed size. If the plant is stressed during these stages, the final yield may be reduced. Water availability is very important for pod setting and grain filling. Inadequate rainfall and excessive heat can also reduce the reproductive success. It may reduce pod setting or interfere with the seed development. So, in soybeans, as in cotton, climate stress does not simply reduce growth overall, it specifically affects sensitive growth stages. And this is the one reason why the yield loss happens. So, after discussing the general effects of temperature and precipitation on crop growth and crop physiology, I will now connect this topic to my master's research. My study focused on Alabama, and the two crops I studied were cotton and soybean. I used state level secondary data covering a long period from 1944 to 2024. This study focused on climate variability and its impact on crop yield. My full thesis considered several climate variables, but for today's presentation, I'm focusing only on temperature and precipitation because these two climate variables showed the statistical significant relationship with yield. Cotton and soybean are the major row crops in Alabama, which is why they were very important to study. In 2024, Alabama planted about 400,000 acres of upland cotton and about 360,000 acres of soybean. Together, these two crops accounted for about 760,000 planted acres, about 37% of the state's listed planted acre. These numbers show that cotton and soybean occupy a large share of Alabama's agricultural land. Because of that, any climate-related effect on this crop is important for studying agricultural viewpoint. So, understanding how temperature and precipitation affect this crop is highly relevant for the state. In my study, annual yield data were obtained for cotton and soybean in Alabama, and the average of monthly climate data was included for every year, and it included the factors like maximum temperature, precipitation, and other additional variables, which I have not mentioned in this video today. So, I examined how these climate variables were related to crop yield over time. The main idea was to identify which climate condition showed the strongest relationship with yield and whether the timing of those conditions mattered. I did a regression analysis to look at the climate variable impact on the yield of cotton and soybeans. Now I will summarize the key findings from my research. For cotton, June to July precipitation showed a positive relationship with yield. This suggests that the rainfall during the main growing period was beneficial for cotton productivity. In contrast, higher August maximum temperature reduced yield, which suggests that the late season heat stress was harmful. For soybean, July and August precipitation were associated with higher yields. So again, rainfall during the key reproductive periods appeared beneficial. At the same time, Higher August maximum temperatures also reduced soybean yields. In both crops, the most important climate signals were rainfall timing and the late season heat. This is why I decided to focus only on temperature and precipitation for this lecture presentation. So, in conclusion, temperature and precipitation are major drivers of crop growth, physiology, and yield. High temperature can reduce reproductive success and final yield, while adequate precipitation is essential during critical growth stages. Both cotton and soybean show sensitivity to climate stress, especially during reproductive development. My Alabama study also showed that the crop responses were strongly affected by the timing of heat and rainfall. For cotton, June-July precipitation supported yield and August heat reduced yield. For soybean, July-August precipitation supported yield and August heat also reduced yield. So overall, this topic shows that the climate affects crop not only at the level of final yield but also through the plant physiology, crop stress, and the timing of exposure. Understanding this relationship is important for interpreting the crop response under climate variability. Thank you and have a great time ahead.